Greetings, chess friends. Today we're going to take a special request from a subscriber who asked to see some games where the kings really don't get castled. At least one player's king does not. And we're going to jump into some really high-level games, and even a game from myself. My own catalog had this feature, quite a nice win over a strong master. So first, French defense here, and knight c3. The two players here are Grandmaster Tari, very strong Norwegian player, and a player with a pretty cool name, Joseph Bellissimo, which means beautiful in Italian. In this game, I think that is an apt description. Knight c to e2, an interesting move, which aims at making this pawn chain, although you don't see a second move backwards with the knight like this so often. But in this case, it works out. Often this knight goes to f3, pawn g3, bishop g2, and such. But a unique characteristic of this variation is that the white king actually does move pretty often. I've seen this in other games before. And here we have bishop to b4, check, and king f2. Engine kind of prefers knight c3, but that would be going a little bit against the spirit of what we did earlier. So king f2 it is, in f6 right away. Black is intending to open this f file on the white king when black castles. In general, with the pawn on g3, the king has a little place to scoot over and hide. But in this case, seems a little slow, and black actually gets the best of it. Notice the queen, and there's even pressure of one of the knights sacrificing on d5. Hold that thought. Bishop e3, very natural move. Castles, very natural move. g3. Again, these are moves you typically see in this opening. The engine really spotting something amazing, and Joseph Bellissimo really finds it. Knight d takes e5. Chess.com says brilliant. And rook takes e3. This move is bellissimo. This idea, unbelievable. Wow. Sacrificing, let's just look at that again. Sacrificing a knight and a rook for a knight. So you're essentially just giving a rook. Black is down a rook here. Knight takes pawn. That's check. With the king out in the open, this is very scary. Notice here, king f2, no good. Knight check and hits the bishop, which the queen can also take. Kind of interesting move. King f4 with our theme for today, but black has a beautiful move, queen d8, retreating, and that is going to be a checkmate in a matter of moves. For example, king takes knight, queen f6 is made on the spot. Fun to look at, but not a good move. Here, white is in trouble. Grandmaster is in trouble, offers a trade. It's good to trade when you are really under attack. One move here knocks white to the floor, and black doesn't find it. Ooh, knight d3. A very slick move, because the real threat is bishop c5, which really can't be stopped. Bishop c5 pins the queen down and also essentially mating the king. It's going to cost white a lot of material. Bishop a5, and here's where the game starts to turn. It just goes to show you how dynamic these games are. He had the same idea, but bishop b6, knight d4, it's like there's no way to really finish this job. King g2, bishop takes. Somehow white is surviving. In the game, we take a piece and he goes back. That's really where the game was lost right there. Bishop a5 and bishop d2. Next move, h4. A great move, giving the king some room to run. Remember, we are up a rook with white here. Bishop d7. Scary move, adding more pieces, but white is just in time. Although clumsy, white does have a number of pieces around the king, and of course the queen as well, and they coordinate after bishop g2. All it takes is a moment to get coordinated. King h2, our king finds perfect shelter. Rook e1, and resigns. Black resigns. What are you to do? Move your queen. Let's just make a move. We're going to capture, let's say with the rook, and we're just up a rook for 2 pawns. Okay, this bishop is not dominant, and a rook is just way, way, way too much. So white wins. An exciting game with the king on the run. We have some legends today here, Botvinnik, and one game from myself, quite the imposter amongst these great players. But here, Botvinnik, and I wanted to draw people's attention to this. You hear nowadays that AlphaZero invented this idea of h4. Botvinnik was playing this in the 50s. This game was 1956.
When the knight goes to h6, this makes more sense, as the knight on f6 would defend the h5 square. But h4 it is, d3, introducing the bishop, h5, already jarring things loose. This game gets really interesting right here. Bishop h6, we're on move 9. H takes, of course you have to take back to defend the bishop, and look at Botvinnik, queen c1, a sly move, threatening, of course, the bishop, but if you take, this is checkmate. Oops. Bishop has to move back to g7, guarding the rook, and the queen invades all the way to f6. I thought this game was about the kings not moving, Chris. What's going on here? Here it goes king e7. That king doesn't move, and Botvinnik responds king d2. That's fine. I don't have to move either, which actually is not just to be fancy, but also introducing the rook into the game. There it is. f4 was to guard the knight. And if you just again compare the pieces, the white king's safe here as can be around the pawns. The queen is invaded. The rook, a good piece, about to invade. The knight in the center, bishop on a good diagonal. All the white pieces are doing well here. And usually that spells good positional characteristics. Usually that spells some tactical opportunities. And that comes all here. Knight f6 invasive, and all in the form of this threat. Queen takes g6. An easy move to overlook. Black is obviously under pressure. This will just really lose the game quickly. If you trade, not a trade, white won an extra pawn, but still the black pieces are almost even worse shape now because white's counterparts are so superior. Notice also knight d7 is threatened. This knight can't move or the pawn drops, and we have moves easily creating a pass pawn here for white. King a6 was the game. He didn't take the queen. Here's the real game. a4, leaving his queen there. King a5, and actually white changes gears a little bit. He says, wait a minute, this king is way off into the danger zone. Queen h4, keeping an eye on the knight, but the next move, again, very smooth finish, g4. The threat of queen e1 is just devastating. This king has walked way off sides, and Botvinnik makes him pay. Next game here is from Grandmaster Alexandra Kosteniuk, still a very active today. This is from 2000, the year 2000. In this game, Kosteniuk's accuracy was an astounding 99.2. What can you say? She is playing here French with the white pieces and a little bit of an unorthodox French, and plays h4. Not exactly copying Botvinnik in this variation, but interesting nonetheless. Knight b5. Very unique French without the d pawn moved or the c pawn, but somehow has some characteristics of the French. Black is playing the French. Castles, c3, there it is, and d4. Okay, now you can kind of see the contours of the French defense. a6, knight d6, where else would you go? cd4, notice you're pinned here, so you cannot recapture with the pawn, and she really turns right to attacking in this one. Bishop d3, a good move in the spirit of the position. When you have that h-pawn there, that means the rook has opened the door just a crack. It can't quite open the file yet, but you can imagine the classic bishop takes h7 in the air, knight g5. If anyone wants to take that, the h-pawn, that would introduce the rook. Otherwise, queen coming in. You know the pattern. D takes c3. This is scary, though. And with one of the biggest material swings, he could take this pawn with check by the bishop, take a rook, and promote to a queen. That is a huge material swing if that were to occur. And Kosteniuk plays the explosive bishop takes h7. King h8. Otherwise, you're just losing. Let's take a look at takes, knight g5. King has to come forward. If you do go back, again, queen h5. This one is all the more remarkable because black could have two queens on the board. Let's say king f1 and just show this beautiful picture. Checkmate. Black has two queens and is checkmated. So, of course, a little easy for these strong players to calculate. King h8 was played in the real game. And here, our topic of the day is the engine's best move, king f1. Not easy to see. We want to use the rook, and that king is still quite safe. How do you know it's safe? Look at the black pieces. They're not ready to launch any type of attack. Still, this bishop is immune to capture. C takes b2, bishop takes b2. That was a little too scary. f6, and finally the real haymakers start coming. Another brilliancy by Kosteniuk. This is a beautiful game. Knight g5 in the spirit of Morphy, Alekhine, take your pick. Just a sensational game. He captures this knight and queen h5. What else? Threatening checkmate, bishop just moving, and queen h7 mate. Knight g8 attempting to block, bishop takes it, king takes, and h takes g5. Using all of the pieces, rook now in the game. This knight is guarding f7, the escape square, almost checkmate. Rook takes f2, king takes f2, resigns. Poetic almost, for our purposes, today at least, that the king makes the final move, capturing a rook, of course, but this threat of checkmate is too much. Any of these checks with the bishop, none of it really does anything. Queen b6, king f3 is just winning. The final game from the weakest player of the day is here myself. c3 Sicilian at a master level. Are you serious? Rufang, by the way, a very strong player, a bit less active today, believe, but he jumped some 300 FIDE points, I think, in the next year after this game, and became GM very quickly. So let's take a look. This game was a Sicilian c3, but has kind of the contours again of the French. It dawned on me while coming up with today's video that the French produces a lot of these games, and I thought, why is that, the French? Well, it does make sense. After all, the center is closed. So moving your king has less, let's say, consequences because there's not a wide open slashing bishops and rooks through the center. Close games, it's a little easier to just move your king aside and keep playing. Okay, real game here. Bishop takes f5, e takes f5, knight c3. Bishop e6. Usually taking here is not great in the French, and black, although it looks damaging, has some very good plans in these type of games. But I was confident. I felt good in the French. I played the French myself with the black pieces for many years, so just roll with it here. And king f1, and the engine loves it. I don't know what got into me. I again thought maybe the rook was useful. Now the h-pawn is already out here. That move was really aimed at preventing g5. But let's just say king f1, and we're not in any danger. The key, if you're thinking about making these type of moves in your games, the key would be to make sure, again, that the black pieces are not able to just spring to life and hurt your king. That's it. Is your king really safe? That's what we're asking. And it appears that white's king is safe. King g1, extra safe now, and rook h3. Maybe a little bit optimistic, but I was thinking about using this rook, at least on the king side. King d7. And one thing I also noticed while making these videos is that moving the king is a bit contagious. It seems when one player kind of breaks the seal and just does it, the other player says, hey, it's one of those games. And we just go the king c7 now, and obviously soon here, king b8. So both players castling by hand. This rook now has very useful eyes on some very useful squares, let's say. a3, knight a5, b4, and it's just an opposite sides castle by hand game. We are here, and both players are kind of ready to storm, and hopefully we get there first. Knight d3, g5, and chess.com has a little marker here informing me that en passant is a special move by which a pawn captures another pawn that has advanced 2 squares. H takes g6, f takes g6. Who can resist the en passant? Knight c5, a great outpost. In all seriousness, this is a very good square. g5, the race is on. a4, giving the pawn. You can have it. The rooks spring to life. Combined with the knight, b7 is toast. Of course not. He plays bishop takes c5, exchanging away one of my best pieces. Queen c6, maybe not the most accurate. Queen d8, perhaps. Rook b3 and rook b1. Doubling on the b file. Open files are just the dream for an attacking pair of rooks. Bishop c8. I guess my opponent thought he had things all buttoned up here, but knight c3. This knight comes back to life. Queen f3, really just plugging that hole, threatening d5. That's still kind of a weak point there, and rook d8 draws some attention away from the attack. Notice now g4, we can play queen takes f4. Rook b4, eyeing the tactic. Now, what actually occurs in the game is a little surprising since this tactic is kind of telegraphed. We are obviously threatening the knight. There's nothing else happening. And if we get to take that knight, queen is staring at the queen, and that would be pinned. So let's just play a very bad move. h5, rook takes c4. He has bishop g4 here. Okay, unbelievable. But the point I was trying to make was this, but the engine just swats it away with bishop g4 here. And black is better. Of course he is. So anyway, real game here. It was king a8, but the same tactic occurs very soon. a5, really kind of proud of this move. A very sensible move, but you are sacrificing a pawn, just trying to open the lines of attack. Okay, if the game is being played on this side of the board, white in general should feel pretty good, as long as we don't lose too much. Knight b5, remember that knight was just buried away here. Now it is quite the best attacker, eyeing the d6 square, and it has another square in mind, knight c4, and again, in light of the variation we just saw, surprising my opponent missed this, rook takes c4. A stunning tactic, which essentially ends the game. Bishop f5. Let's look at what really would happen. If he captures this, queen takes c6, b takes c6, that's checkmate with the rook uncovered and the knight delivering the mate. So, of course, you cannot capture or you lose your queen. He plays bishop f5, hits the rook, trying to dislodge one of the key pieces in that attack. Rook b2, we have to stay on this road to keep the king trapped in there. Bishop e4, and it all works due to this move, queen a3. You can still not take the rook. It is immune to capture due to checkmate. Priorities in chess are everything. Queen takes b5, rook takes b5, and d takes c4. Trying to get as much as he can here, but it's just not enough. The threats are too much. Unnecessary move here. We could have gone even straight for the attack, but f3, I just captured it. Didn't want any shenanigans. Rook a5 threatening to capture here, nearly mate. c6. I guess I just had this aggressive tendency on this day because I was very willing to play a5, sacrifice this pawn, that pawn, move my king. Very creative. It's in this creative mood, I suppose. Rook takes a6, and my opponent resigns here. Of course, if pawn takes, it's just checkmate on the next move. Queen b7. And I think a little bit nicer variation would be if you move, rook a8. And this wasn't too hard to calculate. Queen e7 here, queen c5, and then queen d6. Yeah, I don't know if I saw every move to the end, but somewhere in here I saw, okay, it's clearly mate. Very soon, or we're winning significant material. So one of the best wins of that tournament, and of course, get them while they're young because Rufang is so strong nowadays still. I think if he were to come back, top 30, 40 players in America. So amazing. All right, folks. I thought that was fun to show a few games unconventional a little bit where the kings move for whatever reason. Sometimes a little creative. I'll remind you here, king f1. I'll remind you that when the center is closed, it kind of has a little easier time happening. So that one, king f1. This was just to get out of immediate danger. Same move, but different purpose. King e7. King d2. Remember this one? I told you it's kind of contagious. When one player does it, the very next move the other player does. This was also to improve certain pieces. Our king stays safe where the rook gets active. And this one, king f2, a little bit built into this opening, I think, with the g-pawn. You usually can get your king castled, but this one was a stunning turn with two brilliant moves back-to-back here. Capture, knight takes e5, and then rook takes f3. Bellissimo. I can't think of a better word. Unfortunately for him, it took one slight inaccuracy to lose this game in the Grandmaster. Of course, well, they have a knack for that, finding that right defense. Hope everyone enjoyed this one. And again, don't be afraid to move your king. I recommend looking at some games. You have to take a lot of things into consideration.